Joining us now to talk about the I don't know, the tidal wave of misinformation that's been presented is Heather McDonald, contributing editor at City Journal, the Manhattan Institute. Hello, Heather. How are you? I'll say take two. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Hi, Steve.
Hi.
Good, thank you.
Good to talk to you. Okay, so let's talk about, here's another person who was right in the middle of all this, another juror who said that this race had nothing to do with this verdict whatsoever. And, of course, that coincides with what the one of the white jurors who spoke out first, to Anderson Cooper, also said that race had nothing to do with it. Are you surprised by the direction that this whole post-verdict coverage and theme has developed?
Which direction are you talking about?
Well, as far as it's all about race, and it's Emmett Till, and it's apartheid state in Florida, and boycott Florida, and we need a civil rights case against him, and Holder saying I'm troubled by the verdict, and Obama's race speech. I mean, did you ever think that a case that was going so poorly for the prosecution, once it came to fruition, would ignite what has been ignited?
Well, it's certainly not surprising, because that was how this case has been played from the start, that this is somehow emblematic of how blacks die, are shot in this country, that this honorary white, George Zimmerman, who's Hispanic, is somehow stands in for this massive white threat to blacks, which is just not borne out factually. In fact, the major threat, the reason that young black males have a 10 times higher rate of dying by homicide than whites and Hispanics combined, is they're shot by other blacks. So this is part and parcel of the way this has been spun from the very start.
No, absolutely. And before we get to more statistics here on a black-on-black crime, but when Barack Obama says that blacks are aware of the violence and crime rate, he also acknowledged in that race speech that Trayvon was more likely statistically to be shot by a peer than by George Zimmerman. But he also, kind of blamed the violence in the black community, the dysfunction in the black community, the crime rate in the black community, to a history of violence in this country. And I'm still not sure if he's talking about Jim Crow, if he's talking about slavery, or just what he's talking about. Yeah,
and he really acknowledged the higher crime rate, astronomically higher crime rate, but qualified it. He said, well, it is probably statistically more likely that Trayvon Martin would have been shot by, and he just euphemistically, another black rather than somebody else. So he didn't really even have the courage to outright state what the facts are. And as far as blaming history, I think that's just a complete dodge. It's absurd. That does not help the black community to say, oh, this is ultimately all about racism. And I know plenty of people in the inner city who are fiercely law-abiding that have no tolerance for that kind of excuse-making, because they understand that what determines why somebody decides to take up a gang lifestyle is family breakdown, lack of a proper upbringing today, that is not related to whether there were racist lynchings 100 years ago.
We're talking to Heather McDonald, the contributing editor to City Journal, also with Manhattan Institute, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. And I saw you on I believe it was O'Reilly last night. Did a great job. And I think you followed a taped, on the run, if you will, interview with Charles Rangel. And Rangel poo-pooed the statistic I think it was Daniel Patrick Moynihan who wrote a book about the black family and the breakdown of the black family, and at that point it was maybe 15-25% of out-of-wedlock births and kids growing up without fathers, and now it's, I think, 70 or 75%. And Rangel was kind of asked about that as a reason for black crime and black-on-black crime and black crime in general, and he kind of made a joke about it of some sort, and I just was bothered by that.
Yeah, I think this incident has really been one of these depressing but clarifying moments about the extent of denial out there, both in kind of the liberal elite culture and then at least among these official black spokesmen, to the cultural breakdown. And the instinct is to blame it on, oh, it's all because of, as Rangel was doing, it's because of simply poverty or economic conditions. But poverty is created in this country overwhelmingly by people having children out of wedlock. That's the greatest determinant of whether a child grows up poor today. So it is very depressing to see somebody with Rangel's history. Not that he's got a great record on speaking honestly about social problems, but that he should treat it dismissively, as you say, because there is nothing more important today for all of America than family breakdown, and it's worst in the black community. It's very bad in Hispanics. It's 53% illegitimacy rate among Hispanics, and it's about 22% among whites. But if whites ever catch up to the Hispanic or black rate, we'll see the exact same problems. It's not a race issue; it's a family breakdown issue.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree with you more. And the media coverage and the media frenzy that's followed, again, this profiling nonsense and again, as you heard me say, the classified by ABC as a Puerto Rican woman on the jury, even though she thought George Zimmerman did murder Trayvon Martin, she said there was no evidence to convict him. But she also said no, race had nothing to do with this. But that to somehow make into villains people, I guess, like Jesse Jackson, who years and years ago admitted that when he walks down a street and hears voices of young men behind him, he turns around on a deserted street. He's relieved to see that they're white. I guess he profiles. But to insinuate that if someone understands that blacks, a small percentage of the population to begin with, and if you cut away children and elderly, a very small percentage of blacks are committing a huge percentage of the murders and homicides and rapes and violent crimes in this country. Anybody would be nuts not to be aware of that when they're thinking about their safety.
Of course. And, the media did a fabulous job at decontextualizing the Neighborhood Watch organization in Zimmerman's neighborhood. If there hadn't been a pattern of black burglaries and a sense that the neighborhood was kind of on the precipice of falling into a real downward spiral of crime and disorder, Zimmerman wouldn't have been out there, and he wouldn't have been looking at Trayvon Martin as a possible burglar. That is the absolutely most important prior fact that one needs to know about this. And so I willingly concede that if you're innocent of any crime and you're a law-abiding citizen and you are regarded with suspicion, I disagree with Obama when he says that it is often that black men in elevators elicit sheer terror in the women in the elevators with them. I think that's absurd. I don't believe that is a frequent response at this point in our society. But if you have been in a neighborhood that has been experiencing a pattern of black crime, the solution to that and to the solution to the insult and humiliation of feeling like you are regarded with a heightened degree of suspicion is to bring down the black crime rate. Let's have an experiment for 5 years. If blacks could bring down their crime rate to that of whites and Asians, and everybody knows that, then let's see if there's any type of double checking going on, or people that do respond with a heightened degree of awareness to young black kids. At that point, I'm willing to say that we are a racist society. At this point, though, it is much more plausible to me that people are simply responding rationally to what the undeniable facts are. And that is, again, not only are blacks victimized at 10 times the rate, but black males between the ages of 14 and 24 commit homicide at 10 times the rate of whites and Hispanics combined.
Yeah, it is unbelievable, and it's a sad, sad fact. And one more thing before I let you go, Heather, and you've been generous with your time. You know, this racial profiling, this whole profiling which has become a dirty word to me, and you correct me if I'm wrong because you've been writing about this stuff forever. It all started on the New Jersey Turnpike with that case. Christy Whitman was governor. The whole thing, the New Jersey state troopers, a couple of bad apples, stopped black people, and they called that racial profiling when in fact they stopped them for no reason and just harassed them. I call it harassment, illegal harassment. But the Al Sharpton and the media has turned profiling into racial profiling and racial profiling into something hideous and racist when in fact racial profiling is just another kind of the profiling cops and you and I do every single day of our lives.
Right. Well, I think that the cops have maybe a higher burden to really be looking at behavior, but a defense attorney that works for the cops once said to me in response to the big incident in New York where Sean Bell was shot.
Yeah.
Outside of a nightclub in Jamaica, Queens, when the SUV he was riding in started to back up into a bunch of undercover detectives. They'd been looking into a bar that had a long history of drugs and prostitution.
Right, it was the night before his wedding at 3 in the morning or something.
Right,
yeah.
And somebody said there'd been a gun, and there'd been reports of a gun in the bar.
Right.
And Bell turned out not to be armed, and the cop who shot him was black, and the defense attorney said, if we stipulate that it probably is the case that New York City officers have that trigger a split-second faster fear response and sense that they may be under threat when faced with young black males in crime-ridden neighborhoods, if we concede that, can we get a parallel concession that the reason they have that reaction is because the crime rates are so disproportionate? And in New York City, blacks commit 80% of all shootings, though they're 23% of the population, and 98% of all shootings in New York are committed by blacks and Hispanics. Whites commit between 1 and 2% of all shootings. That's the facts, and that is going to affect how police respond to different groups when they are in high crime neighborhoods and there's reports of a gun.
Absolutely. Heather, pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye. Heather McDonald, ladies and gentlemen, Manhattan Institute.